All right, thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Ryan Padalita. I'm an account manager here at Cities Digital. And today I'm joined by Ron Race, our solutions architect trainer and all-around all-star here from the consulting department at Cities Digital. And we're going to be going over some digital and electronic signature options with Laserfiche. This is a topic that I get asked about quite frequently. And it's not just contracts or SOWs, so we see this a lot with some internal documents that need to be signed or signed off on. And as part of an approval process, it's best to know what your options are before you can kind of plot the next plan and see what the best way to proceed forward is. So today's agenda, we're going to be first focusing on digital signatures versus electronic signatures. We'll be heading through certificate authorities, Laserfiche digital signatures, DocuSign electronic signatures through pads and web forms, and ultimately we'll be having a use case for the contract management workflow. So I guess let's start, Ron, with a question for you, because this confuses me, and this confuses a lot of the customers that I interact with. What is the difference between a digital signature and an electronic signature?
All right, well, thank you, Ryan. Yeah, so those two terms, I think most people use interchangeably. So definitely always a question that comes up. In most definitions, a digital signature is really almost like an ID. Digital signature is a little more nebulous than what we think of as an electronic signature. Generally, it is a way of digitally signing that you are who you say you are. It's something that is used quite extensively on the internet. You know, most credit card transactions are actually all done with a digital signature that's going between the bank and the vendor or whoever you're paying. So the way that digital signatures work is generally what happens is we have like a hash algorithm is what they call it. So in terms of Laserfiche and to some extent all types of digital signatures, what happens is we take a snapshot of something and we say this is what it looks like at this point in time. And they use what they call a hash algorithm, which is a big long series of numbers and letters and miscellaneous values that don't mean anything to most of us, but is a way of uniquely identifying something, whether that's a document or a particular transaction. That hash value is used to basically make sure that everything that you're seeing is verified and it's from this user. So you can see here in our little picture there, we have the hash algorithm, which creates a new hash value for the document, which is then sent using a private key. That creates a message of some sort that is sent over to this, along the way to the receiver. The receiver has a public key that we all use that translates back the private key that was sent, and if the hash values match on both sides, that is a valid transaction. So that's the long and short of what a digital signature is. This differs.
Oh, sorry. So yeah, can you kind of contrast that with electronic signatures?
Yes, thank you. So yeah, this is much different than what we think of as an electronic signature. As you can see here, on this screen, an electronic signature is literally an electronic version of your signature. So we do this with signature pads, on iPads, directly on the screen. It's basically an electronic version of somebody signing a document and can be used to basically appear on a document. That's one of the real another big difference between especially in Laserfiche, the difference between electronic signatures and digital signatures. Laserfiche's digital signatures are in the background, and there's really not a signature on a page. You don't see it on a signature line, whereas an electronic signature is something that we can use and we can place on a signature line in a document, just like you're signing a contract. That is kind of the main difference between those.
So let me kind of reiterate based on what you said. It kind of sounds like if I'm at the supermarket and I've got the signing pad and I sign it there, there's the visual representation of my signature. That's an electronic signature. But when I take my credit card and I push it into the machine and I'm not signing it, I'm not doing that gesture that mimics the ink and paper, but that's a digital signature. Am I getting that right?
Absolutely. That's a perfect analogy of the difference between the two. The electronic signature is something you can see, you can verify, you can say, oh, yep, that's my signature. But, like you said, if you're using a chip, sending your PIN, that is a perfect form of a digital signature that's used. Okay,
so if we kind of take this a little bit further, a digital signature kind of feels like a sealed document, like you've got that you're confirming that envelope was closed and was sent to the individual, so it's kind of sealed. You know, just got it right out to the. I'm sorry, sorry, wrong seal. Kind of like a wax seal, saying that the contents that were delivered are secure, and that's the same. So, am I getting that right?
Absolutely. That is a great analogy as well.
All right. So, but if I have a digital signature and I'm sending it out, how do I know that someone's not starting the forgery from the start? How do I know that my signature isn't fake? I mean, certainly when I was getting sick notes from my mother to stay home from school, I mean, how do they know that the origin of that note is secure?
Yeah, that's another great question. So the way that our signatures, our digital signatures, are confirmed is we have what we call certificate authorities. People have heard of these. VeriSign, you've probably heard of them. And so basically what an organization will do, or even a person, if you are setting up your own digital signature, you will have a certificate that is granted to you by a certificate authority. The certificate authority basically is making sure that you are who you say you are. You sign up, you provide a bunch of information. They then give you a certificate that you can utilize to say, I am who I say I am. And that is really a very important aspect of that. Without our certificate authorities, pretty much anyone could make up a certificate, or they could make up a digital signature and say, yep, this is who I am. So that is really what we utilize to verify these signatures. So we use an outside authority.
But theoretically, if I've got a large organization, perhaps a county, could I issue my own certificate to my internal users?
Actually, you can, especially in the terms of Laserfiche. When we are creating our digital signatures in Laserfiche, one of the steps in the process is to create a certificate. And so we can either use that certificate authority, like I said, or if you are keeping your documents inside your own ecosystem or your organization, you can actually create your own certificate on the Laserfiche server. And you'd create that, and then you would assign it into your Laserfiche administration console, and it would be a way for you to send your signatures around within the organization.
Okay, so I've seen digital signatures internally in Laserfiche nested away under that metadata tab. But it's obvious that you can sign and remove the signature. But what happens when I click that validate button there?
Yeah, so going back to kind of our original slide there where it talks about how digital signature works. When we sign, you can see the little sign button there on our signature. When you sign a document, what is happening in Laserfiche is we take everything about that document. The number of pages, what the pages look like, what annotations are part of that document, and we create that hash value that I was talking about. It's just, you know, this big footprint basically of what this document looks like. And if anything changes about that document, if we add a page or delete a page or modify the document in any way, what happens is that hash value will end up changing. And so if you click on that validate button, what it does is it says, hey, Laserfiche, is my footprint the same as it was when this was signed? And it will come back and it will give you either, yep, we're valid or we're invalid.
Okay, so it's a way to determine that the document wasn't tampered with, no one messed with the pages, and that it's in the same condition as when the original signature was added.
That is correct.
All right, so it sounds like this solution works really great for internal documents, make sure things are kind of part of an approval process, remain unchanged. But I'll tell you, I know a whole host of organizations that are working with outside vendors, with contracts going out the door. How do you stay in line with kind of meeting the needs of getting your documents out of Laserfiche and bringing them back in? And I know we can certainly scan or mail documents out, scan them, and bring them in, but what are some of our other options in that capacity?
Well, we do have a few options. Probably the most widely used one that we have is our integration with DocuSign. And what that allows us to do is to take a document that is in Laserfiche, and we'll open it up and hit our integration button, and we'll say, okay, I want to send this off to DocuSign so that I can send this to my client or customer and have them receive that document, be able to sign it with an electronic signature. So you can see here, you know, this is what it will look like in DocuSign after you've sent it off there. DocuSign will allow you to place a signature you know, anywhere within the document. If we are doing documents that we tend to send out a lot, such as contracts or things that are very standardized, you can actually set up templates within DocuSign itself, and those templates can then be, you know, kind of pre-filled out with the signature has to be, you know, this document has to be signed on page 1 and 4 and initialed on page, you know, 2 and 8. You can set all that up ahead of time. You just put in the information of who the recipient is. Generally, that is done by using email, and then you enter in the name of the person. You send it off, and they will receive an email, looks just like this, and it will say, hey, you know, you've received this document. Please click on the Review Document button. And when they do that, it takes them out to DocuSign itself. Out in DocuSign, they are able to, you know, very quickly type in their name, hit next, next, next. It does it all very nicely. It moves them through the document everywhere where they need to sign or initial. And then they basically say adopt and sign. They click that adopt and sign button, and that finishes the process for them.
So it sounds like, all right, so it goes out to the customer, they sign it, comes back to Laserfiche, so I don't have to scan it and get it in. And I know that it comes with a lot of data that goes with it. And where is this in the spectrum of electronic signature, digital signature? Is there a certificate coming with this? How is DocuSign saying that that's authentic?
Yeah, so DocuSign is a good example of kind of both the electronic signature and the digital signature combined. When the user signs their document in DocuSign, we are creating an electronic signature on the document itself so that you'll see the signature on the page. Along with that, we are also capturing information that DocuSign is storing with an ID number that is unique. It can be traced back to basically where was this document signed, who signed it, where was it, done. DocuSign themselves are a certificate authority, so they have their own certificate. You can actually see right here in the document that there's a signer certificate applied, issued by DocuSign. So there's all this information that comes back to Laserfiche on the document that is available to you.
So, well, I've got a question. What if I'm in a situation where, all right, I send it out through DocuSign, it's great, but I see that it's going to an email address, and I've got something extremely sensitive, extremely important, and I need to guarantee that that's the individual signing it. Are there any ways we can kind of kick this up a notch to kind of really have that veracity of signature?
Yeah, DocuSign allows you to have like a two-factor authentication. And so basically what you would do is you would email the document off to the user that you want to sign the document, and then in a separate communication you would pass on some sort of PIN number that they would have to enter in order to get into the document to sign it. So that if you're familiar with two-factor authentication, it's basically using two different devices or ways of communication to get you the information you need to log in.
Okay, so the DocuSign integration seems pretty easy. You click the button and then it goes out. But what about the scenario where maybe it's the end of the quarter, end of the year, and I need to send out thousands of documents, important documents that need a signature and need to come back into Laserfiche? What are my options for kind of automating that away?
Yeah, absolutely. The main options that we have available for that are workflow activities, and we have kind of three main workflow activities that are available. We have a total of 4, but kind of 3 are the big normal ones that most of our users are using. The first one being request DocuSign signature. So these actually, both the request DocuSign signature and the request DocuSign signature with attachment, they're very similar. And what that does is it works with templates that you create in DocuSign. It allows you to create a workflow that would say, okay, I need to send out, this verification letter to, each of my employees or each of my clients and have them sign it and send it back. You can set up the workflow to perform a search based on the users you are looking for, the people you want to have done sign it. Then the workflow will move on to that activity that would allow you to basically send out a link out to DocuSign that would forward the email on to all those people. The other activities we have are retrieve DocuSign envelope XML. Actually, I even think that the read XML has been replaced with the retrieve DocuSign envelope XML. And what that does is when the items are brought back into Laserfiche, we can actually go out and grab additional information from DocuSign. We can tell DocuSign, hey, we need to look into that XML information, and we can actually pre-populate fields within Laserfiche based on values that the DocuSign system actually captured.
Sounds like a pretty robust solution, Ron. But when I'm visiting, I especially have seen this in district courts. There are a lot of times where you've got the person right in front of you. You don't need DocuSign. That doesn't seem to make any sense. What are the options for scan? Or you don't want to scan. You don't want to print and scan. I'm trying to really avoid that. Is there a way we can get maybe an electronic signature in person?
There is. We have two different ways of doing that. One is our electronic signature pad integration. Using a signature pad, we can actually allow the document to be signed right there by the person who needs to sign it. Once you get that signature, you can click OK, and that will actually take the signature and allow you to place it on the document wherever you need it. Once you've done that, it gives you a dialog box asking, are you sure, this is where you want it. Once you say yes to that, the way that this signature pad integration works is we actually burn that signature directly into the image. So,
so
this
totally
is a very
flat. Totally flat image. Can't alter it.
Exactly. Yes. And that makes it a much more legally binding document. Another way, if you don't need that extra level of protection there, we can also use signature stamps within Laserfiche. If you've been longtime Laserfiche users, you probably have seen the stamp features within Laserfiche, and you can actually create signature stamps by literally, having your users go around, sign their names. You can scan those in and save them as signature stamps. And the great thing about this is it's very easy to use. You can actually use it with workflow. It is something that you can tell workflow, place this stamp here on this particular location on a document, and it will go ahead and do that. Kind of the negative aspect of the stamps is that they're not burned into the image. Now, if you export the document out of Laserfiche, if you send it out via email or just export it out of the document or print it, it does become obviously a flattened image, like we mentioned before with the signature pad. But as long as it resides in Laserfiche, technically that signature can be moved, removed, changed in some way because it is in a separate layer above the document.
Well, all right, it sounds like the stamps work really well for when I'm internally adding a signature to a document, that could work. And I assume we could somehow authenticate that with Laserfiche. How do we know like who did what with the stamps? How could we really make sure that that stamp was applied by a specific person and not just like copied by someone else?
Yeah, the signature stamps work really well for an approval process or something like that internally. And kind of the safeguards that we have to protect the stamps. Kind of our first line of defense is access rights. If your users don't need to have the ability to remove metadata or annotations, excuse me, or modify annotations, then obviously we can take those rights away from them. So that's kind of your first protection layer against people removing or modifying your stamps. The other layer of protection is if that stamp is modified or removed, Laserfiche does have audit trail, and that would be audited and stored in the database saying who modified it, who removed it, when and what time, what time they did it, and all that information.
Okay, so it sounds like this works for internal documentation really well. We've got some safeguards in place. What about what if I want to get signatures from the public? What if I want non-Laserfiche users to participate a little more aggressively with filling out documents, but I don't necessarily want to go through the production costs of adding a DocuSign?
Yeah, probably the easiest way of doing that is using the Laserfiche Forms product. So Laserfiche Forms actually now, as of version 10 and higher, has a built-in signature field. You can actually place a signature field anywhere within your form. The great thing about this is it allows the people filling out these forms to sign directly on the screen with a touchpad, or touchscreen, excuse me, or sign directly with an iPad, right on the screen. They can type the name in, and they can choose however they'd like it to look. You can have multiple signatures within a form, so that you can actually, have the main person submitting the document sign, then send it off for approval. The supervisor can actually approve and sign as well. And in this example here, we can even send it up to the deputy director and have a third signature filled out there. The great thing about forms is that we can actually tell the system to have different numbers of signatures based on different rules. So in this option here, we have based on dollar amount. If things are under a certain amount, we only need this one person's approval. If it is between a certain amount, we need these two people to both sign and approve the form. And if it's over a certain amount, then we need to send it on to that third layer and have us sign. So the web forms is a really great way of doing what you were mentioning.
So kind of like get signatures quickly for kind of common processes. I really like that. But I also get asked a lot, all the time, about contract management with Laserfiche. What are some of the solutions in place? And I was wondering if you could walk us through a scenario in which workflow is playing a big part and in getting a contract out the door and signed.
Yeah, so we do have a kind of a sample process, contract management process that we can kind of walk through. It involves 3 different activities that are related to signatures. Now, the signatures that we're going to be talking about using in this is the digital signature. So this is Laserfiche's digital signature, not an actual electronic signature on the page, but this is kind of gives you a good overview of some of the things that we can do. So this is basically a contract management scenario. Basically, the proposal is to build a new playground in a city park that's sent over to Parks and Rec, and basically that proposal has to be reviewed and signed by certain members of the department. The department head, and other members within there. We then forward it over to our contracts administrator in a contracts management department for our final review, and then after that the contracts administrator reviews the proposal, approves or denies it. It's then signed and finalized. So kind of going through this, one of the things that we need to do is capture certain information about the proposal. You can see here we can automate the business process using digital signature activities, in the workflow itself. So here the department head will review the proposal, either approves it or denies it by changing the value of a field. In this case, the department head approval field. He or she would then be able to digitally sign the document to signify that, yep, this has been approved. And again, on certain occasions it may be sent to others within the department to review and countersign the document as well. So brief overview of the workflow itself. Let's see, we kind of went over that. Let's take a look at the document signatures. So in Laserfiche itself, we can tell the workflow that we want to be a business process. We can get the document signatures activity, which would obtain any signatures from the proposal, and we'll create those and turn them into tokens, which you can then see on the next page there. This will kind of go to a conditional situation. And basically what we're saying here is if the proposal was modified since it was signed, that would mean that the signature is not valid. And so we have a conditional saying, hey, if the signature is modified is true, we need to go down this immediate exceptions path. And that would end up sending the document into a separate folder for exceptions, and then we would email the contracts clerk. Now, if it is valid, then the next thing that we would want to do is move it into our negotiations folder. And while it's in the negotiations folder, we're waiting for basically a departmental approval within there. So while in negotiations, we have an email that we can send out asking the contracts administrator to, here's a link to this document, please open it up, review this proposal. And then after that, again, the person would mark it either approved or denied, and that goes to the writing decision here, where if it's in a pending review folder where the processing is invoked. Okay, so from here, the contracts administrator will review the proposal. They update the value of the contracts administrator approval field. Again, if the proposal is denied, we would move it into a denied folder. The contract status would be set to denied. Contracts clerk is notified by email that it has been denied. If it is approved, we can also, again, notify the people that it's been approved. It would then move on to the next portion of the workflow. One thing to note, in order to prevent any confusion that may result from multiple invalid signatures, we can also utilize the delete document signatures activity, which can delete any legacy signatures on the proposal. So if we do find at any time, okay, well this was denied, so it kind of has to get reviewed again, we would want to remove all those signatures off the document so that it can get reviewed and updated as needed and then signed again.
And then I guess that brings us to the end of the process there. So it seems like sending out mail and notifications is a really big part of the contract review process. Can you tell me a little bit though about what about PDF signatures? What do you got in store for that?
Yeah, so as far as the PDF signatures goes, if you have PDF documents, obviously PDFs have their own signature files, or signature fields, excuse me, and when you sign a document when you sign a PDF document, excuse me, that is actually kind of a similar process to the DocuSign process. So it will actually allow you to put an electronic signature on the document, and it also has its own little digital signature involved with that as well, so that it can verify if that's been modified. So Laserfiche does have a verify PDF signatures activity. The activity will verify that the signature on a PDF is a trusted and can produce tokens with information about the signatures. Those tokens are on the screenshot here. We'll have the sign date, the sign reason, if that is configured in the PDF, whether the signature has been modified, whether it's trusted, how many signatures there are, again, whether they're trusted or modified, and then the name of the signer itself.
Okay. So in kind of preparation for this, I kind of went to the basics, and I went to to see what the e-sign legislation from the year 2000, kind of what that said about electronic signatures. And my big takeaways from kind of reviewing that legislation was that basically just because a document is an electronic format, it's not ink and paper, that does not mean it's invalid. It can certainly be a valid signature because it's entirely digital. But another big part of that seemed to be you need to be able to provide a copy for the person who's signing it. They reasonably need to have access to that document that they've just signed. I know there's kind of a lot on this, and the range of what each organization requires will require a conversation with your legal team, your respective legal teams, and what everyone is comfortable with. But there are a whole host of options out there for getting the right signature, digital signature, electronic signature solution in place. So together, Ron and I put together a couple of implementation questions to kind of ask yourself as you're building a process to streamline getting these signatures in place. So number one, who is signing and what technical aptitude that they have. If a person's very computer savvy, likes to be on their device a lot, a DocuSign makes a whole lot of sense. But if someone does not have access to computers, maybe doesn't even have internet at home, obviously that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Having them come into the office and maybe signing the digital touchpad might be a better solution for them. Sometimes a digital signature is necessary, but sometimes it isn't. And maybe doing a simple electronic signature might be enough to meet your needs. Do you have a method or service to authenticate the user? Is there a way that we can tie that signature to that individual so that we know it's them? Again, going back to that legislation, you need to have a way to provide that person a copy of what they've signed. And lastly, and obviously as Laserfiche being document management and enterprise content management, we think, where does this record go after it's completed? If we did all of this effort to get a signature in place, it doesn't have as much validity if we can't find the document later. So there's definitely some things to consider about when you're putting together a solution in place for a specific business process, and I think some of these questions are appropriate. Ron, is there anything you'd like to add to this list?
No, I think that this covers it pretty well.
Well, if anyone has anything else, feel free to reach out to us. I'm Ryan at citiesdigital.com and Ron at citiesdigital.com are our respective email addresses. And I hope you guys enjoyed this webinar. Try to make it as informative and useful as possible. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.